It's March 4th, 2021, and we're talking LEC and data science with Fnatic coach Tolki. This is the True Sight Podcast. Welcome to the True Sight Podcast by Oracle's Elixir, your source for in-depth analytical coverage of professional League of Legends and the rest of the esports world. I'm Tim Magic Sevenhusen. Our guest today is Gary Tolki Mialaret, coach of Fnatic in the LEC. Tolki, welcome very much to the show. Sorry that my French accent is terrible, even though I'm Canadian. How have you been?
I've been doing fine. I moved from Tokyo to Berlin a few months back now to work in the LEC. Before that, I was working with T1 remotely and Splyce, where we made a top 8. And now I've done Fnatic, so I'm doing the reverse team since you were there 6 years ago.
Yeah, jump from.
Maybe I'll follow your footsteps.
Yeah, from different leagues, different places, going all over the place. I think you've got a pretty storied background in the scene that people may not know a lot about. You filled a lot of different roles and being kind of visible in different places and sometimes invisible in other places. So, I think it would be great to just give people a little bit more detail on, you just gave the very quick rundown on kind of different roles you've held. But I think even going further back than that, like your Twitter tag is TolkiCasts. Like, where did you come from in the scene? And
So, I'm a boomer. I'm 31. So in esports years, it's about 70. And I've been around a lot of scenes, but regarding League of Legends in particular, I started casting League of Legends in Season 2. I casted the Worlds in French with the O-Gaming TV crew, Chips et Noir. I was there in 2013. I met Ocelot at Tales of the Lanes. So it goes a long time ago back in French, in the French scene. Then I kind of gave up on it for a few years. I worked on Magic the Gathering with Wizards of the Coast for a few years. Went back to fighting games, which is my first community. And I moved to Japan 5 years ago in 2016, and I wanted to go back to League of Legends. Because I saw it was a booming market, esports in Japan. I wanted to be a part of it. Wanted to create something in the Japanese scene. So I created a team there. We completely failed. We didn't qualify for LJL, the Japanese league. So after 2 years, we closed the team, Hokuto Esports. But great logo, great branding, except we kind of sucked. And then I was picked up by Splyce about 6 months later, by Duke in particular, who's also French. He saw my background because I have a background in engineering and machine learning. I have an MSc in computer vision. And so Duke was, valuing the skill set a lot and wanted to apply some of the skills to League of Legends. So I became data analyst at Splyce, where I was very much technically oriented. Like all I did the whole year was Python, SQL, setting up servers, parsers, databases. For the team, I really wanted to have a technical, analytical approach to League of Legends. We made top 8 at Worlds. The one who beat us were T1, and they liked my job. So I joined them after they lost in the semifinals. And I became the first European member of staff for a Korean team, where we got a very good spring. We won LCK Spring, so I can say I have an LCK title. And if I win LEC as well, I think I will be the second one after Huni to do it. And at T1, I continued doing more of the same. I went deeper in the machine learning aspect of it. I really cleaned up a lot of my work. Also open sourced a lot of it. So some of the people who listen to this podcast might have used some of the Python packages I've released over the past few years. I've done an in-house bot for the NA teams during the off-season since I had a few days off. And I've also, done other projects in data science for T1. But I wanted to go into coaching. 2 years as an analyst, you're like, yeah, I have good ideas, but what if I was the one coaching? So I got in touch with teams. Fnatic was also very interested by my past experiences out of esports in particular. And that's how we assembled a tag team with Yamato of 2 coaches. Technically, we have the same coach title, even though Yamato is the head coach in official capacity, of course. He's, of course, much more experienced with players, with working individually with the human aspect of League of Legends, while I'm the guy who is looking at data, who's doing more the analytical approach to the game, the number-based approach to the game, and so we try to play off each other's strength. We don't stifle each other. We each try to do what we're good at. We try to complete each other, and we have a very good dynamic, I think. So I really like the new path that my career has taken.
Yeah,
was a long one.
With that kind of background, I think people can understand pretty quickly why you and I have, orbited each other quite a bit over the past few years and talked a lot, shared ideas, shared data sources and pieces of code now and then. And yeah, it's obviously I think we approach a lot of the same problems, and sometimes from different angles, and it's been really interesting to bounce things off each other. As we're more on the team side of things. I'm a little more on the outside and third party kind of stuff. But
one of the things I didn't say, by the way, regarding third party, is that I'm the one who did some of the backend for Leakpedia as well. I helped them a lot, and their parser is something I wrote in partnership, unofficial partnership with the Leakpedia team. So I also try, to help out of the team and the third party environment around League of Legends.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit rare to find somebody who is deep within the teams themselves, but also contributing on the community level and providing resources for people. And like you said, you've got some open source repos on GitHub that people can use. You've contributed a lot to Gamepedia's architecture. So it's been, it's great to have you on to talk about that. And I think we'll talk about all the different aspects of this a little bit as we go. But, I think one place that I'd love to jump in with is kind of some of that third party and the kind of community oriented stuff, and especially about the in-house matchmaking tool, because you mentioned this is something you wrote kind of on your time off, and it's always a big topic, especially over the past few months in North America, about players having their practice environment, and if they want to play with a better ping, they have to go on the tournament realm, and they set up these in-house circuits and so on, and a lot of that is driven by the ability to queue up in Discord, be match made with 10 players and actually run a game that way. So what was your motivation for building this tool and this bot, and how did that kind of come to be?
It was Inero, I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced, who was looking for somebody to write a bot. He posted about it on Twitter. I was like, I can help. I'm contractually assigned to T1, so I cannot accept any money. I asked to make a donation to a charity in my name instead.
Oh, nice.
And I spent 2 days during a weekend working on the bot. So the first version of the bot, which is still, what it's roughly based on, was written in 2 days, and it was working. They used it for about a month before it dropped in usage. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of summer, it started picking back up again. Cadrol from the LEC asked me if we could set up a server in Europe for ERLs and LEC players to use the bot to play in houses. So I did it. I refreshed the bot. I redid the whole backend structure of the bot to use Postgres instead of SQLite, to be more robust, be a real professional thing. And that's how it came into being what it is today, where I think it's a pretty good tool to use. But yeah, one of the reasons why I picked up in the first place was because I wanted to learn new skills. I picked up SQLite by doing it. I picked up Discord bots. I had never done one before, so I wanted to learn. So that's why I went there. I like to learn new things by doing open source projects. I feel like it's always a good thing. People show you, when you did something wrong when it's open source.
So what you're saying is that you were being selfish and just wanted to learn new skills, and it had nothing to do with just wanting to help out North America.
Exactly. I never. I could help them all they want, would still beat them. So.
Oh, there we go already. How have you felt about the way, or the amount that you mentioned it was used for a month at the first, off the bat, and it fell off a little bit. I think this off season, it got, there was a very high profile in-house circuit with Core JJ leading a lot of that kind of stuff. Have you kind of monitored the way it's being used? Is there any kind of personal pride in how much it is or isn't being used?
I'm in the servers. I'm still the person handling all the backend. So I actually have direct access to the database of the bots. So I kind of like it. Just to know what's happening.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been used for a few months. I'm of course very happy when it's in use, but it didn't really pick up. People still prefer to play solo queue with the public rank rather than just playing in houses. And even though the bot does offer duo queue, even though the bot does offer playing on the tournament realm and private queues, it's still not good enough, it seems. So.
Yeah, I think it does make some sense that it would be used a lot more in the off season rather than in season, where now everybody's on their teams and you're in your little bubbles. You might not want to reveal as much. So I understand. Hopefully it'll be. I'd say as long as it does get used in the off seasons relatively consistently, that would still be a win from my perspective. But we'll see how it's
going to happen. Honestly, people forget about it. In 3 months. So
you need somebody to pick it up and run with it, like Core JJ did, like Cadrol
and the big
did.
streams when Captain Flowers was also casting games. It was helping a lot. Giving it visibility helps.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's been a cool project that I think a lot of us have benefited from, and hopefully, I think the players themselves have benefited from that a lot as well. We'll see how that moves forward. Um, but what you're doing right now, so that was something you wrote a while ago and you maintained it a little bit. But what you're doing right now, obviously, coaching Fnatic in partnership with Yamato, like you said, you guys have kind of the both the coach title internally, but the LEC requires that one person is specified as the head coach for paperwork reasons, basically. Uh, what is kind of the dynamic of the way you reference it a little bit, you and Yamato working a little more kind of with the person to person side of it, you're a little more on the analytical side of it. What does that look like in practice in a given day of preparation?
In practice, I mean, most of the days for professional teams are scrim days. So players come, you eat together, you play 5 games of scrims, you give feedback, and then you go home or you split up. So, Yamato and I are both there, but sometimes, I'll spend the whole day looking at data, doing scouting reports, watching specific points about our opponents because, I have lots of data, I have timestamps I want to go and check in-game. Mm-hmm. And while, he's the one actually leading the scrims, so that's a dynamic that happens often. He's more involved, in the day-to-day scrims than I am. And then I'll come back, I'll look back at the replays. I set up an automated way, of course, of recording the scrims, the draft, all that, to make sure I didn't have to do it by hand.
Yeah.
And so that was also some of the work in the first few weeks. So usually, I'm kind of flying around, doing whatever I feel like is the highest priority at a given point, while Yamato is more focused, on really the daily training, leading the draft during the scrims and all that. And, I jump in after the draft, for example, I'll talk with Yamato for 5 minutes about the draft and, we'll talk about what we want to experiment in the next one and a few ideas we had at the end of the draft, which happens often. So yeah, it's a fluid dynamic with Yamato being more of the hands-on coach, always there with the players, while I'm more on and off. Sometimes I want to write some code. I want to write some big SQL queries. I want to, maintain my parser because it crashed, which happens about every 2 months because Riot crashes things.
Changes something.
So yeah, I cannot be as involved in the day-to-day as Yamato, so he's taking the lead. But when needed, I'll take it too. When sometimes he cannot, do meeting with the players, scrim reviews, I'll be the one watching, I'll be the one handling it, and we trust each other to be able, to cover for this.
What is when you're working with a team that has so much experience, right? Like every player on your team, you got Whippo, Selfmade, Nisqy, Upset, Hillisang. These are all very experienced and high quality players. I imagine you're not in there coaching fine points of micro with them. What are the kind of the things that you tend to focus on with a team like this? What are the most important things that you feel you need to manage as a coach when you've got that type of a roster?
Honestly, the human interactions are pretty important, making sure people communicate well, are happy playing together, that the champion pools fit what their teammates want to play. Because you cannot, be saying, I want to play, I don't know, Velko's mid. And that's it. It has an impact on your whole team. Whatever you want to play will impact the rest of the team and the champion pools needed by your teammates to be able to play with you. So we have to balance that a lot. And, when there is discussion, I wouldn't say conflict, but, when there is discussion and disagreement regarding how to play the game, Yamato and I, we step up, we're part of the discussion. We try to weigh the pros and cons, to analyze it and make the players come to a fruitful conclusion, which is needed very often.
Yeah.
But we're not here, to be gods amongst men and teach them the ways. That's not what we do. We're more like here to mediate and give them information, bring them information that they might need, and it's been working pretty well. Now they know they can come to me when they need some random data that nobody else has access to, and they know in 5 minutes I'll be writing a query. And I can tell them, when Kaisai is more than 500 goals ahead at 15 minutes against Zaya, usually she wins, stuff like this.
Yeah.
Over 50 games in ALPL, I'll have the data. I'll check.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a useful thing to be able to have for sure. I'm sure in a different team environment with a different set of players, maybe you look at Mad Lions last year or something like that, you might need more of that authoritative coach who's going to say, like, here is the plan, and here's how you fit into that plan, and off we go, like, follow me. But with the guys you're working with, again, like being more of a facilitator. What I imagine Grabs has done a lot of at G2 over the past few years, right? Like, let's just make sure everybody's friends and that everybody is communicating well, and that when there is a disagreement, you're helping them kind of massage them into the same place together, right?
But I think even with the rookies, you have to push them to take responsibilities and be the ones, leading their improvement. If you hold them by the hand the whole time, you'll arrive at the end of the year and you'll need to babysit them every single game, and it doesn't really work. At some point, you have to let players fly from their own, and that's why, as a coach, it's called a support staff for a reason. We're not a driving staff; we're a support staff. We're here to support the players. We're here to prop them up. We're not here to bring them up. We're here to push them from behind. It's a different image in my mind.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And how does that, obviously you're in a coach role now, and with T1 you were in more of an analyst or a data analyst role. But how has that changed? How has that been different with Fnatic compared to the kind of work and the type of input you had at T1 and maybe even the culture that you were integrated into?
Being there on the day-to-day in person does change a lot since I was working remotely at T1. This means now the player know me personally and they can ask me, they know to count on me, they know what I can answer, they know what kind of reports I do, and I present them myself directly to the players, so I get a lot of feedback directly from them. And that was not really the case at T1 because there was always, an intermediary, which was the rest of the coaching staff between the players. But instead, my reports, they would get translated by Hajinson, who's now the analyst for T1. It would get sent to the coaches that would then present it to the players. Now, there is no filter. Every single day, I'm interacting directly with the players. I'm the one presenting them data, information, graphs, because I do a lot of graphs, data visualization. And so I get a lot more feedback about what they're receptive to. I have to adapt a lot more to find things that resonate with them. Numbers doesn't work. I tried to teach players what the standard deviation was. They were lost. They only understand average. You show them 10 numbers, the only number they will understand is the average. Standard deviation, they have no clue what it means, even if you explain. So I adapt. That's the big difference. This year I've had to adapt my style, and I have had to work closer to the players and really change my ways of presenting information to make sure it sticks to the players directly.
Yeah, it's all about knowing your audience, right? Like, in knowing how to get an idea, how to take some very complex ideas, because I'm sure behind those numbers you present, there's sometimes some very big, complex things going on under the hood.
Yeah, there is machine learning. There is lots of stuff behind. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but nobody understands how machine learning works anyway, so we'll just go for that. But I'm joking, of course. But when it comes to that and the idea of like presenting numbers or presenting visualizations to the players to understand, or even to other coaches, depending on whether you're in a T1 situation or something else like that, what are some of your favorite things that you like to convey? What are some of the ones that are just like personal, like, oh, I really love when I get to use this metric or this, visualization?
I can't really tell because nobody else uses them and they're not really publicly accessible, so it would be hard. But one of the metric I use a lot is a metric that I created that looks like a win rate, but takes into account the recency of games, takes into account the skills discrepancy between teams, and helps you very quickly identify outliers much quicker than you would with a standard win rate. So that's the metric I use the most. Outside of this, I think it's getting pretty popular, so I can talk about it, but I really like splitting stats between wins and losses, because for a professional team, what matters is knowing what makes a team win and what makes a team lose, not the average. And those are two very different patterns that happen with the team. And there are teams that have widely different performances in wins and losses, in which lanes they play for, in how they move around the map, and those patterns are incredibly easy to spot. And that's the thing I really like to do. Almost every time I look at a metric, I look at, let's say, positional data and everything, I will split it between wins and losses to try and see if the patterns are different, and usually they are.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, like, when I relaunched Oracle's Elixir a while ago and built kind of the 2.0 version of the site, one of the things that was really important to me, now this is going to be driven live off a database, was being able to have the users live filter stuff, and having a win and loss filter is one of the things that I think gets used quite a bit on the site. Especially, fantasy players love to be able to combine, what does a player or a team do in wins versus what do they do in losses? Because then you go in, you say, we think they're going to win this matchup, therefore, how many points they're going to earn, but also for coaching and for other things as well. I think one of the things that I've always found interesting to think about with win-loss filtering is that in a theoretical sense, you actually want to be able to say, look at the metrics and then say, do they lead to a win or do they lead to a loss, rather than reversing the causality. But in League, there are a lot of metrics that are win biased, right? Like if you're winning, therefore these numbers tend to go up and you end up the game winning. So there are actually reasons where the causality can be they win, therefore the numbers are this, which is it's part of the whole snowball effect, all these kinds of things that you can go really deep on League of Legends analysis. But it's one that I think a lot of people... Yeah,
it's a very specific game because when you win early, you win late. When you score a basket in the first 5 minutes, you're more likely to score another basket in the next 5 minutes, which makes absolutely no sense, honestly. Which is why all the best teams in the world for the last 10 years have been teams that could consistently create early game leads. Sometimes the game went late, but usually the best teams in the world have been able to create an early game lead and capitalize off of it and finish the games quickly. And it's become more and more pronounced in the last few years because the overall level is getting better, which is why in a loss your numbers will look quite different, because usually you're getting smashed in losses in League of Legends.
Yeah.
And so it's important to make the distinction. Where are people getting smashed when they lose?
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to look at. Speaking of winning and losing, Fnatic right now, 7 wins, 6 losses. You're one game above 500. You're 5th place in the LAC standings. I think when people look at the roster you have, the expectations they might have had, this is not where they would have thought the team would be at this point. But there's more than just the wins and losses.
To be honest.
I had pretty high expectations. I was, if I had done a power rankings in LAC, I would have said Fnatic 2. Behind G2. But, here we are. Do you feel like the 7-6 record reflects the actual level of play you guys have put out there?
Yeah, I guess, because we are 7-6, so what can I say? It does reflect how we play out there, but of course I feel like we're title contenders. I don't feel like regular season matters that much in LEC. As long as you're top 4 at the end of the split, you play the same number of best of 5 in the end. And whether you're 4th or 3rd doesn't change anything, because first seed decides who they play between 3rd and 4th. So it really doesn't change much. Even if you get 5th or 6th, it's really minimal. You just play one more best of 5. And if you want to win the title, you have to beat everybody in the end. So I'm not really concerned. And we did consciously, try out stuff. We did consciously do drafts that we knew were risky and not optimal if we wanted to maximize every single game's win rate, because we think that's wrong. In the long term, if you want to be the best team, you cannot just be playing the simple stuff. We could have picked Orianna, Zaya week 1 and do like Excel. Yeah. We're playing them tomorrow, so I'm going to trash talk them a little bit. We could have done it like them, and play scaling while people are getting used to playing together. And it works. We pick a few easy wins, but we don't really care about that. We're not here for the easy wins. I think we can very realistically make it to playoffs, which is still our goal. And I don't think we'll miss playoffs. And if you don't miss playoffs, the only thing that matters is how good you are when it starts. And this, I think, will be very high.
Yeah. I always do find it an interesting conversation to say, how does a team's actual quality of performance map to their win-loss record? It's something that I personally, from the outside, especially being a kind of a content creator and all of that. So, in the episode of Run It I did this week, I was looking at kind of the number 2 to number 6 teams in the LCS. And one of the points I made about Dignitas, especially coming after week 3, for anyone who hasn't watched that video, I looked at they were tied for 2nd place in win-loss record, but when I looked at some of their advanced gold metrics, some of my, asking about your favorite metrics, a couple of my favorite metrics are gold spent percentage difference, which takes the total amount of gold spent by each team at the end of the game and runs a percentage difference on them to basically say the margin of victory, and also a goal percent rating, which is at any given point in the game, as the game goes on, how much of the game's gold do you hold? So are you playing from behind or ahead, and by how much? And Dignitas were ranked, I think 6th and 7th in those two metrics, despite being tied for 2nd in the standings. So I thought, I don't know. they're not as good as their record looks. When I look at your metrics right now, Fnatic 5th place in win-loss, but 3rd in those 2 gold metrics, which is one that says to me, okay, Fnatic maybe deserve 1 or 2 more wins than they've gotten. They're not a 5th place team, right? So indicators that you guys are playing better, and in traditional sports terms, got some bad bounces maybe, or something, that kind of thing.
We threw. We hinted it a little bit. You can go at it.
Right. Yeah,
the words, dedicated to it in the League of Legends community.
Yeah.
We did hint it.
There's a lot of custom League of Legends terminology for doing bad things, throwing, inting, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we did it all. We did it all.
But, I think with the level of experience you guys have and the amount of playmakers in your team, that's always something you can expect a little bit. You're going to go out there and try some stuff, especially in the regular season.
Something we're good at is having a lot of kills and death in every single of our games. Before 10 minutes, we're like the bloodiest team in LEC. And, it's a style we want to lean into. We think it's the right one. And that's so actually something I don't really talk about anywhere else is when we built the roster, when we recruited a mid laner, a new bot laner, I specifically looked at stats regarding their early game performance, regarding their activity on the map in the first 10 to 15 minutes, and how impactful they were early. And that's why, for example, we did get Nisqy over all the other options we had, because in NA, he was very, very, very good at finding early plays with a Blabber, but also, by himself. He had a very deep champion pool. He played some Yasuo Gragas last year. He played pretty much everything that was open, and he played them in a very active way. And when you have Bwipo, Hillisang, Selfmade on your team, you want other players that lean into it and that want to be part of the fiesta. And so we recruited a few more clowns to go with it.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk a little more about Nisqy, partly because he's coming from the LCS back to the LEC, and that we do tend to have a lot of NA content on here. And he's a player that I've always celebrated a lot because of exactly the things you're describing. When you're leading into this and saying the type of player who enters this, and go, that's Nisqy, right? Somebody who's very, very active on the map, gets out of his lane, willing to do a lot of things. Even sacrifice some of his own waves in the mid lane. And I think you can see that in what he's been doing this year with you guys already. His laning stats aren't good. Like, he's usually down in gold and experience, but he's out there on the map making stuff happen. And he's also playing a really deep champion pool, 9 different champions in 13 games so far. What has it been like integrating him into the team with these players that you have built around him?
It's been very easy, honestly. Nisqy is a very plug-and-play kind of player. He just fits right in easily. You don't have to do much. He's a good presence. He's able to hold a conversation on both sides. He's able to spot his own mistakes and to fix them really fast. He's able to learn new champions really fast, and he will grind 15 solo queue games and be able to play it on stage in a few days. So it really didn't require anything from us or from the rest of the team to integrate Nisqy in the team. And also, I knew about that before hiring him because I used to work at Splyce, where Nisqy had just left when I arrived. So I heard the other coaches talk about Nisqy and how he was, and I knew he would be a perfect fit for the team. Like, he fits right in. There's really not much to say about it. We didn't have to work extra hard about it. We just had to let him get used to play with the other players, let him get used to play with Selfmade in particular. Mid jungle is very important to work together.
Yeah.
And once we got that done, we got pretty good results.
Did you have any concerns coming into this that Nisqy would struggle to bring himself back up to just the head-to-head mid lane level? Because that was something I think in the community a lot, especially from probably European fans who just have a very negative opinion of North America and the level of play in the LCS. They say, Nisqy, and he wasn't even the best player, the best mid laner in the LCS, and he's going to come over here and he's going to be garbage. Is that a perspective that you guys even talked through at all?
The thing is, it's really overvalued. The best players are the players who know when to give up on their lane and go affect the rest of the map. When you can go lane is nice, but first it won't always work. You will have games that you need to win where you have a bad matchup and you will get pushed in, and you have to know, when it's okay to drop 2 waves under your tower to TP in another lane to create a lead and win the game. I think that's a more important skill to have and a harder one to learn, than, having good hands. And Nisqy doesn't have bad hands in any way. When he played against Caps, he didn't have any issue in lane. He's playing the matchups at very, very high level. And he got back to AUS server, which helps a lot in terms of grinding solo queue. Sure. There's a good training environment, so I never had any doubts regarding that. I think he was pretty underrated in his time, both in EU and in NA. He was always top 3, top 4 mid laner, I think, in the leagues he played in. And he was bringing, this X factor in being able to do stuff that other mid laners wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you on the underrated side of this. That I've been kind of beating the drum for Nisqy in his entire time in the LCS and saying how he was undervalued, and he was the best part of Cloud9's summer playoff run. That was not a good playoff run. Like they kind of bombed out at the end of that season, but he was the one that was trying to bring them across the finish line when the rest of the team was really struggling. So I'm enjoying kind of seeing what he can do in the LEC level, and that he's kind of keeping up and contributing there. I'd love to talk about, as you mentioned, the mid-jungle partnership, because Nisqy and Selfmade, I think the people who were excited about this move, including myself, looked at Nisqy Selfmade and said, here's the LEC version of the Nisqy Blabber partnership. A jungler who loves to get a ton of resources, loves to carry, and Nisqy's a really good fit for that. How have you seen that partnership grow over the last couple months?
I feel like, it's a balance, because Selfmade is also actually great on playing low resources jungler. Before last year, he was playing Rek'Sai, Gragas, Sejuani. It was the meta. He will play the meta, whatever's good. And if, there is a lot of farm in the jungle and we need to help our jungler farm faster, I think, they are able to work together well. Nisqy is able to pressure mid well enough that Selfmade can get double crabs if he has, a clearing speed advantage. Nisqy, can make it work. And yeah, I think the synergy come from moving better on the map together, which took time, because Nisqy, in terms of macro play, had taken a bit too many NA habits. So once we fixed that, it went way better, But moving with the jungler, going for dives at 4 minutes, if the bot lane is under tower at 4 minutes and your jungler clear top to bot, you don't invade golems. You dive them. That's what we do in Europe. So yeah. He kind of have lost, the edge, the killing edge.
Yeah, the 5-man bot lane tower dive. That
you should not be scared.
One of my favorite plays. No. 3-man dive, yes. 4-man dive, sure. No,
5 is a bit too much, but 4 is the right number. If you can push mid and your bot lane has a push advantage, you should pressure the dive. Because if they stay, you kill them, and if they don't, you push them off.
Yep.
And when they don't respect, you have to go there. You have to make yourself get respected. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm kidding a little bit, of course, but there was some adjustment from Nisqy playing with Selfmade, Bwipo, Healy, and being on the same page in terms of macro, in terms of the plays they want to go for, what they think is a good play, because Healy-sang in particular sees play that other people don't. But usually he's right. When you look at the replay, it's like I knew they had 2 seconds cooldown on this spell and 10 seconds on the flash. So I did flash under tower with 200 HP, but if we all went in, they were all dead. And after, we're like, yeah, of course. Yeah, it makes sense. In the heat of the moment, though, some other players did not follow. Yeah. And it's sometimes something we had to get used to and make sure we all see the same plays. We all share the information needed to go on the same place, to take the same decisions. And that's how we got Nisqy on board.
Are there any players or any teams in the rest of the league who have really caught your attention in coming back into the LEC that have surprised you about what's been happening in this region?
Coming back into the LEC, so that's only Broken Blade, right? And Treats.
No, so I mean with yourself coming back to the LEC, not the players, but you coming back in. Who outside of your own team, who's really caught your eye this year?
I think the bot laner of this team called the G2 is pretty good. Just kidding. But honestly, I don't really look at things that way. I feel like all players are humans, and if they do something, you can do it as well. And that's how we approach things at Fnatic. We have no doubt, if our opponents can make a champion work, we should be able to make it work too. And this way, when we see good plays, and there are a lot of good players in the LEC, but there is no one that stands out to me. Because when I see good things, I'm like, yeah, we can do this too. We can make it work. And so in the end, I don't put any player, on a pedestal. But Treats is going very well for SK. Unfortunately, we're going to beat them on Saturday, so he'll look a bit less shiny after this.
Yeah. Who are you all playing this week? You're playing Excel, you're playing SK. This is just a 2-game weekend, isn't it? Yeah. And then next week is the super week to wrap off the season. You have 2 weeks
and we
left,
finish the season by playing Rogue. So if we beat them, it's gonna feel good going into playoffs.
Yeah, for sure.
But 5-0 going into playoffs would be, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, get that momentum. Speaking of kind of what you mentioned about when when another team or another player is able to pull something off, you guys feel you can do it too. I think that does kind of tie into the idea of Reckless leaving and Upset coming in and kind of taking over that role.
He's not playing the same. That's
no,
sure.
not playing the same way, but in that same position. But I think Reckless. One of the things about him has always been his flexibility. He can take all the resources, or he can take no resources at all, and still perform really well. Upset, I think typically you'd look at him and say he's a guy who wants to get a lot of resources, and statistically he is getting a lot of resources for you guys. He's getting a lot in his lane. He's getting a lot of the farm later and doing a lot of the damage. Although other people on the team are contributing a lot of damage as well.
Not really. We are literally in the most balanced team in a goal destination plus 15 minutes. So I wouldn't say he's getting more farm plus 15 minutes. We're just all getting more farm because we have better macro. If you look at gold per minute, our top laner and jungle and mid have higher numbers. But in terms of percentage, like if I remember correctly, mid, jungle, top, and bot are around 21% of gold generation after 15 minutes. So I think we're pretty balanced team. We don't put all our eggs in the Upset basket.
No, when you look at the CS share post 15 minutes, Upset is ranked 4th among bot laners. That's true. So he's behind. Crown Shot is number 1, way ahead number 1 in 6 games. He's got over 35% of the CS, which is like double lift numbers.
That's a lot.
You have Jessica down at 32%.
We get the kills to people.
yeah. Jessica and Comp both around 32%. And then you have Upset just under 30%. So another pretty big drop down. So that is relatively balanced. But he does seem to be the one getting the real leads out of lane. And Nisqy is dropping some, and Whippo I think is going pretty even if I remember correctly here.
Whippo never goes even. He goes hard ahead or hard behind.
Yeah.
That's where looking at standard deviation is what matters.
Sure. Yeah. Or just
you need to look at
graph it out. Yeah,
because he has a decent average. He's almost has 0 average, perfectly clean. But deviation doesn't say the same things.
No, it doesn't. So Upset being a player who, relative to the rest of the league, he does tend to get quite a bit of farm still and quite a bit of resources. Does it seem like he's still under any pressure or feeling the sense of kind of replacing Reckless at this point, or is that all in the past and he's, not in his mind anymore?
So it's not even the best.
Yeah.
There was never any pressure of replacing Reckless because we're just here to do something else. We feel like the way Fnatic played in the past was pretty good, but we can do better, and that includes playing differently around the bot lane. So it was never about replacing Reckless. It was always about playing another way, and so in this way there was never any particular pressure for him, to perform like his past competitor. But the thing is, regarding Reckless, you say he's good when he doesn't get resources, and when he does, he can play both roles. I'm not sure that's entirely true. Like, he's had great teammates in the past, but if you look at his highest successes, he did well when he was handed a lot of resources, like in spring 2019, in all of 2018. That's when he shone the brightest. Like, when he's not the one getting the attention from his team, he's a good player, he's doing his job, but his team is not winning as much, and they're not, getting titles. So he did adapt his gameplay, but I'm not sure if it was the right one, so we'll see in playoffs. I think, if anything, I would be curious to see G2 playing completely around snowballing bots and playing super aggressively there, and I'd be curious to see where it goes, but I'm not sure if that's a play style they want to look at.
Yeah, I think kind of the lower resource Reckless is a little further in the past, right? When you go a little further back in his career and what he did, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So, in more recent days, he's definitely been a higher resource player for sure, and delivered very well on that, getting a ton of CS and and so on. But yeah, no, I think with Upset on your team, I think you guys brought in a really good player, and he's definitely been contributing. And so, you guys have a really fascinating dynamic. Do you ever have to, with all the playmakers on your team, do you ever worry about reining them in a little bit? Like, you've mentioned that you do encourage the proactivity and
if anything, we want more. But it's not enough yet. There are still plays that we're not going for that would work. Like, if you want to succeed at Worlds, you have to be a team that can see the high-level plays, the hard plays to execute, and pulls them off instantly without any hesitation. And you have to work on this, and there will be some misfires, of course. But no, I think the term playmakers is not... It's a bit like weak side player, Like, it's just another term to separate the good and the bad players. Like, there is no good player that's not a playmaker. All the top players of all times are playmakers, and none of the best players of all time that I remember were weak side players. It's a euphemism to say strong player and bad player in the end. Those are crucial, critical skills you need in all 5 roles to be able to win games. Like even Ruler in Samsung, it's a Flash Ultimate on Varus that won a game. It was not him standing in the back line and waiting for things to happen. Like if you're a good player, when you see an aggressive play, you will take it and you will make it work. And I think at Fnatic we're very aggressive about it. So
yeah, I think sometimes
we have to rein it back.
There is a little bit of a difference to me between the idea of playmaker versus non-playmaker versus, and then the idea of a weak side, which is to me specifically a term that gets used much too broadly. But for me, it's a lot more about, especially in the early game, and where the pressure on the map is, right, and whether you're pulling waves to your turret more, whether you're pushing out more, whether you've got your jungle hovering, that kind of stuff. I think that term it has been used much too broadly for sure. So, but did you realize if you want more kills, you guys are 0.2 kills per minute higher than even the highest team in the LPL. So if you want more than that in your games,
not enough yet.
1.5 combined kills per minute. That's what we're aiming for this season. Good to know.
We also have, so the thing is, we also have short games at 30 minutes on average. So overall, the metric is not really truthful to what's happening. And also we just try to punish as hard as we can. And we think, it's going to be fruitful in the long run. And sometimes we did do poor plays and we're learning. We're trying to stop going for those poor plays when we did make mistakes. And maybe in the future we'll be able to get just as many kills without dying as much. Because in terms of death per minute, I think we're also the highest pretty decent
margin. So I was referencing combined kills per minute in that metric.
Okay.
So kills and deaths. Yeah, it's a lot.
I don't know those are our deaths, so makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's all been fascinating. I think hearing about kind of your take on your team and the way you guys are playing, the way you want to approach things. I'd like to pull back a little bit to speaking a little more on the technical side. I think having you on here as someone who has done a lot in the analytics space, does a lot of coding, manages a lot of different databases and drawing from different data sources. I think one of the things that's always really interesting to hear is some of the differences in what types of stats or what kinds of approaches to analysis are useful in a pro team context compared to what might be common or useful or interesting for fans, for broadcast, for any kind of content creation. What is the big divide that you've seen in those different applications?
The big divide is that we don't have the same goal. Broadcast fans, bettors, they try to know who's the best team is, and I really couldn't care less. What I need to know is how you beat any team in the world. What I need to know is what is the best way of playing League of Legends. And that's not the same thing as finding out what the best team is and who's going to win a specific matchup. The only thing I care about is the weaknesses of each teams, how much you can abuse them, and how is the best way to secure wins, which is very different, I think, as a goal, which means I will look to very different numbers than other people working in this space. So
I guess one way to summarize that would be that it's about the way teams play, not about how well teams play.
That's the spirit. Because even if a team is the best in the world, my only job is to find a way to beat them. I can know they're better. I can look at all the metrics and see they're better. I really don't care as long as I find one way to beat them, and that's what happened in 2019 with Splyce. I think it's a story, that's not really told enough. 2019 Splyce didn't have a good social media branding, but they did take games of FPX, SKT, G2 Esports, and Fnatic in 1 year, despite having 5 players who afterwards did not, shine to, the higher heights of competitive League of Legends. But when all 5 were together, they were winning a lot because we were very good at finding and pinpointing the weaknesses of our opponents and pushing hard there instead, of letting them play what worked for them.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of a two-edged sword in the sense of, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the team you're up against, but also on the other hand, like you said, the best way to play League of Legends, which would look more, I'm sure, understanding the metagame, right? Like understanding which champions are the right ones to use right now, what kind of matchups you can use, other kinds of details like that. How much time do you spend looking into, whether it's drawing solo queue data or stuff from around the pro scene, looking into metagame-related analysis?
Pretty little, since I've automated 90% of my job. Everything is automated. I have automatic visualizations. I have a Discord bot. I can type a comment and ask for a visual tree map visualization of current professional trends and solo queue trends. I have everything already automated, so I don't spend that much time on it. Maybe like 15 minutes a day, I will look daily at the data, at what's happening in the world, and I make sure, I keep the pulse. But I don't have to go much deeper, because if anything pops up that I didn't notice, it will be very, very visible to me. I've made sure my whole workflow is adapted, so anything new, I'll be the first one to catch it. I'm 100% sure of that.
Do you draw that, so that's a lot of the solo queue kind of stuff? So is that mostly looking at like champion related trends, or is it stuff within like champion play styles, and like how deep do you drill with that kind of thing?
In solo queue, I parse every single EUS and Korean Master Plus game, which is, I think, the highest level solo queue games you can have access to, because Chinese server is very hard to get data from. But in those, I look at outliers in terms of one-tricks builds. If I have a random player playing, I don't know, any jungle with a 80% win rate over 30 games, building, straight breaker, it will pop up in the way I do my analysis, because it's a build that has a high deviation from others and is winning a lot. And that's the kind of thing I pay attention to. As soon as something that's out of the ordinary pops up, something that only one or two players have noticed among the best solo queue players in the world, then I take notice, and I try it myself usually on my solo queue accounts. I ruin a few games for the sake of learning, and then I can give useful feedback, because I still used to be a challenger player, so I still have those hands a little bit. I want to try, and then I give the information to my players once I have a better formed opinion of those things. And it's all about builds, champions, and stuff like this.
Do you find the players are pretty receptive to that kind of input, or do they tend to hold on more to their own ideas?
It varies a lot from player to player. For example, Selfmade doesn't really believe in the numbers. For him, it's some dark magic. So it's a bit harder. Blipu, on the other hand, I could tell him, man, I have 10 Kai setup games into NAR, and they're all wins. You want to try it back? I'm down. Get me a scrim. I'll play it. So it really depends from player to player. Some players are much more receptive to wanting to go deep in very specific counters, very specific builds, and trying out new ways to approach even their own role, while other players want to be playing the meta and they're happy with it and want to play it at the highest level. I don't think that's a problem. We don't need to have 5 fancy picks every game. 1 or 2 is enough.
Yeah, I mean, from a serious perspective, the more variance you introduce into the equation, the harder it is to isolate the effects of any one of those really unique changes. So, I mean, as much fun as it would be, throwing in a completely different 5-man.
We did go for a very fancy draft against my Lions, for example. In the first match against them, we had Evelyn jungle. I think we're still the only ones in the world who have played it the split. Rally mid, we're going in. And we threw it in the mid game with one teamfight that was poorly executed, most importantly. But we were winning that game for most of it, and it was a very, very off-rhythm kind of composition. I think no other team in LEC at the moment would dare draft this. But we thought it was very good in the situation, and we could pull it out. So sometimes we do go a bit too deep. So we try to stop a little bit, be a bit more meta.
Yeah, well, and I think by the time you hit playoffs, then the things you've learned from trying those different things hopefully become very useful, and then you can...
We'll have very spicy things for playoffs. Yeah. If you think regular season was spicy, you're in for a wild ride.
Fair enough. Yeah, we'll be watching. So I'd love to wrap up a little bit with some questions that listeners have submitted, and I think there's one from IamnottheNSA that I think we've addressed a little bit of it, so I'm gonna adjust or pivot the question just a little bit. But when it comes to things like being a coach and giving input or advice on things like itemization, rune builds, champion picks, how much of your input on that do you think comes from your experience as a player, your role as somebody who's got this background in analytics and can come at it from a very numerical approach? Like, how do you balance the types of inputs that you have into the recommendations you make to the players?
I think you need a very, very deep understanding of League of Legends itself, of how the game works, of how to play it at a high level, because even just an items build is determined by how you want to play a champion, what are his strengths, what are his play patterns. You can read the numbers, but if you don't understand how it's going to work out in a high level environment, it's not going to work. Like there are some champions that look strong in solo queue, but for example, don't translate well to competitive, because in competitive, top tier players are able to play around some of their strengths. It was the case, for example, for Mialaret for a long time until he was buffed a lot. And at high level, you cannot land your ultimate on a target with flash or blink. It just doesn't exist in a LAN setting. But there are lots of examples like this where you have to understand the play pattern and what makes a champion work. For item builds, for example, we talked about Gangplank item builds with Whippo back in November, and I know how Gangplank works, and I offered 3 builds, which have become the 3 meta builds since then, because I understood how to play the champion, I understood which stat he needed, what was his play pattern, how hard you could go into damage, how hard you needed survivability and stuff like this. And it panned out really well because we've known what would be his meta build 3 months earlier than everybody else. So I think a lot of understanding of League of Legends itself, being able to play that like master level at least, is pretty important, because it's not always reflected in the numbers. If optimizing item builds in particular requires you to properly understand how the game is played.
How much do you think it is important for a coach or an analyst or somebody who's giving those types of input to be able to play at that Master Plus level? Because I think we've seen examples in the past. There are some more famous ones of someone like way back when with Monte Cristo. He was doing this high level LCK color commentary, but I don't think he was ever more than a silver player. And you have other coaches who just don't even play at all. Do you think that that really holds them back from being able to give this level of input, or are there other ways that you could approach it and get that insight?
I mean, no, I don't think you can be a coach and not be able to play the game. There's no top tier sports coach in any sport that has not been a top tier player for some time, or a professional player at least. I'm not saying you need to be top 5 challenger, but master level is top 2000 in any server. So worldwide, there are literally tens of thousands of players above this level. So if you cannot reach this level, it sounds pretty doomed, because it means you won't be able to understand the whole spectrum of what goes into being a good player. Maybe not being able to execute it is something. I know there are coaches with handicaps, for example, and I think they would be able to reach master tier if they were able, to play it to the fullest extent. And these kind of situations, I think it can work out. But overall, being at a decent level and being able to play the game at a decent level at some point in your life sounds pretty important to me.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting to get your take on that. And, I think it's
Jose Mourinho was a professional football player. Sorry, I was looking at the chat and somebody said Jose Mourinho, the maybe most famous football coach of all time, he was a professional player. He started his career by being a professional player. He was at that Master Plus level.
Yeah. No, as I was saying, interesting to get your opinion on that. I think it's a topic that has come up in waves now and then over time. Always interesting to get different takes on it. So another question we had was from Warringkingdoms. Do you, as a data analyst in league space, do you think it's important to have education or an academic background in that, to have some kind of a degree, or is that something that is, what kind of value does that have?
Honestly, I don't know, because I have one. I have multiple degrees actually. And it did help me a lot score a job in this field in the first place. That's because I had those degrees that I was given a chance. But those degrees in themselves, they didn't teach me much that I use in my job. I got my degrees almost 10 years ago. My MSc is computer vision. I was using a scale invariant feature transform, which is a completely obsolete method of doing computer vision. I wrote my whole master's thesis on it, and nobody cares anymore. So I have a degree, but it didn't, help me in anything with my job. What helped me was playing the game pretty well. It was being able to learn really fast how to develop, learn, industry standards in terms of code quality. And this is not things I learned during the time I got my degree. So I don't feel like you should need a degree to get to a data analyst spot in the League of Legends field, but you have to be able to learn how to code, how to use databases, how to use data very fast, and be able to understand the meaning behind this information.
Yeah, I think that's true in a lot of education contexts. You know, you can get the degree, and often the degree is just proof that, hey, I've put the time in and I've got some backing. But it's not actually the stuff you learned at school most of the time that you're going to actually go out into the workplace and use, right? It's a lot more about developing practical skills, learning how to learn. It's a cliche, but you know, learning how to go out and discover something and build a new tool set. And I mean, that's going all the way back to what you said about building the in-house spot. You built this and you picked up some new technical skills from it, and that's not something that the degree helped you with, but you know, being able to have that background gave you some foundation of how.
I was using MATLAB and Java in my studies. You know, that's a very boomer developing programming languages that nobody uses anymore. I had to learn everything from scratch for Python 2 years ago. I had never launched any script in Python until 2 years ago, and I just picked it up for my job. But I was able to learn fast, which is what helped me.
Yeah, and Python is a good one for that. For what it's worth, it's a relatively accessible language for that kind of thing, but. Yeah, well, this has been really fascinating, and I appreciate the time you've put in to sharing your insights, sharing your experiences. What is the best way for people to follow your work over the rest of the season and in the future?
On Twitter, Tolkicasts, and my GitHub. I still, write code very often, try to open source as much as I can. And that's about it. I usually post on Twitter. I will try to stream again on Twitch at some point, but when I'm in Japan, I'm with my wife and enjoying life in Japan, so I end up not streaming if I'm also working. It's a bit hard to balance out both. But while I'm alone in Germany, I might stream a little bit more. It's also Twitch TV/Tolkicasts. One of the very first Twitch partners, having a partner for a decade now.
Wow.
A decade. There are not many people who've been Twitch partners for almost 10 years.
No, that's right.
With an average 30 viewers now, I think, per stream.
Good stuff. Well, we'll look for that and see if you're able to get the time for that in the future. So thank you again very much for joining. You can support the TrueSight podcast at patreon.com/oracle_elixir. You can subscribe on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as anchor.fm/TrueSight. And make sure you check out the Oracle's Elixir Discord server, where we talk a lot of League of Legends esports and other games. We talk about data science and some of the technical topics that Tolki and I touched on today, and a lot of other things. Links for all of those, as well as Tolki's social media, will be in the show notes. This has been the TrueSight podcast with Gary, Tolki, Mialaret, and I'm Tim Sevenusen. Thanks for listening.